Howdy, folks. Alright, so quick explanation. I missed a lot of videos, obviously. I looked at all my video views and I said, nobody's watching this. It says I have a subscriber. It's probably someone trying to scam me. Fisher of some sort. Maybe they're taking my information. I don't know. So I was a little demoralized and I stopped recording videos, but I realized, no, I must continue. These are the playoffs. I'm going to keep doing videos. I feel kind of ashamed. I got to show some level of consistency here. If I don't keep making these videos, there's really little downside to it except for the fact that I got to come up with stuff to talk about. But anyway, I'm not going to go too far into depth on that. I'm sorry I missed videos. This was supposed to be something that I hung behind me to, that was where these curtains are here. Oh, God. Unfortunately, the thing does not stay up there, so that was that. That was enough of that. It didn't work out. So I'm using it as my couch topper. So you've got at least more Patriots-related paraphernalia in the frame, if it's not exactly covering everything up. Although I don't like the fact that this is all hanging loose. The second before this was fine, and now all of a sudden it sucks. So just close that up there. All right. Here we go. So, what do we got? Well, we got a situation. It's a shame I missed the playoff preview against the Chargers. I didn't feel good against the Chargers. And, I guess with good reason. They didn't play great against the Chargers. It wasn't bad. Drake May got over whatever. I think it was really not so much Drake May wasn't really so much the problem as it was the offensive game plan, which was just not good at all. Kind of surprising. Josh McDaniels kind of worries me a little bit. Hopefully, maybe Josh McDaniels learned something from that last game. They couldn't really score for the whole first half, and if it wasn't for the defense playing out of their mind, like you've never seen pretty much this year, 3 points in a game is just absolutely ridiculous. Wasn't for that, we don't stand a chance of winning that game. So, surprise, surprise, defense stepped it up. I would not have seen that coming in a million years. Everyone's giving Zach Kerr a lot of credit for designing a supposedly stellar game plan. I wasn't really like a huge believer in Zach Kerr until that game, really, honestly. The defense, I thought earlier in the year, we'd have our usual miscue in the first quarter. They would drive the field, they'd score a touchdown. We're all used to seeing this. On some level, that trend doesn't bother me entirely because we managed to score a first touchdown in all those games, and then all of a sudden the defense locked down, and that's what we saw most of those early games. They gave up a touchdown, and then, which people were saying was due to scripting. Apparently, Zach Kerr is not good against scripts. I don't know. This is a weird concept to me. Like, why don't teams just script every drive if this is a possibility? I don't understand why there isn't more scripts if it's that hard. Is it just impossible to script things? It's just they could have different scripts for different scenarios. To me, it's like this is a confusing thing. If scripting works that well, then why aren't they scripting more of the game? But anyway, so regardless, I don't quite understand it well enough on that level. But a lot of it seemed like we couldn't play zone. We'd start in zone. The zone coverage was bad. I was thought that maybe that was the fault of the safeties. We were working with some, one safety who people are saying is underrated. I don't even know how good our safeties really are, honestly. Woodson had a great game against San Diego, so that's a good sign. I think he's played a lot, so obviously, for a rookie, the fact that he's played actually more snaps than the rest of the defense, people were saying, it shows he's got some talent. Otherwise, they wouldn't be giving him that much responsibility. But there were a lot of plays early in the year where I felt like Woodson was missing assignments, where I felt like there was a lot of guys open in the middle of the field. I assume that was at least in part on the safeties and probably also, Marcus Jones to some extent. It's hard for me to think that Marcus Jones is ever to blame because he's so good for a guy who's 5'8". I think the only problem with Marcus Jones is that he's 5'8". And so a lot of times, with Marcus Jones, you have to hope that he knocks the ball out after the guy's caught the ball rather than that he deflects the ball in the air, because it seems like he's not always tall enough to get to the ball, but he is very good at knocking the ball out after they've caught it, which is not something you want to have to rely on. But with Marcus Jones, I almost expect to see him knock the ball out at this point, and that's exactly what he did in that San Diego game. But the defense had shown an ability earlier this year to lock down as long as all the players were healthy, and that's the key thing. I think a lot of sports pundits, are not realizing the difference between the Patriots when they have their whole defense healthy versus when they are lacking some of their key guys. And we have most of our key guys. They're not 100%, I don't think. I'm curious how healthy Tonga is. He's coming back from the foot injury. I'm curious how healthy Landry is. People were saying he didn't do much in that game, so it's kind of, even though it's nice to have him out there, and hopefully he can get a sack, or get some pressure on Stroud. It's not good if he's not even close to 100% and just sort of being a placeholder and not letting someone else get in there. Maybe I think they played Christian Ellis a lot in that game. So we'll see a combination of Landry and Ellis. I don't even know how much Landry has left. It seems like his knee is pretty badly messed up. I made a post on Pat's Pulpit where I speculated he probably had I think he probably played through injury he shouldn't have been playing through. That's my guess. He's either got a MCL sprain, or maybe he's playing through something bad, because he's not the player he was. He had 2.5 sacks in that Raider game in the first game of the year, and since that game he's had a sack a game is his top level. I'm not trying to say that it's rare to get more than a sack in a game, so I'm not trying to be too critical. And he did get, when he came back, right before he went out for the rest of the regular season with an injury, he did have, apparently he injured his knee in the New Orleans game, and then he had 1 sack after that in the Tennessee game, which at the time made me think, oh, he's going to be okay. And then he didn't get a sack for 4 games after that, and then he got a sack per game until he went out. So it's kind of curious that, he apparently the injury must have affected him, because he didn't get any sacks at all for a period. And then you'd think he was getting stronger, a sack per game, and in the last 3 games he played in the regular season, and then he's out for 3 weeks. And, I don't know if I've noticed a huge difference. I mean, he was our, by the numbers, he's our best pass rusher. He had the most sacks in the year. So, you kind of wonder, well, he was basically a non-factor against the Chargers. What does he really have? What are we working with here? It's the Landry situation is a big mystery to me. I'm sure it's going to come out that he had some kind of major injury, and I wonder if he's even going to be a factor at all against the Texans, because we really need the pass rush to step it up, and so we'll have to see what happens with that. But his whole situation worries me a little bit. I suppose that's to me is the major concern. You look at everybody else. I think Tonga, who's a guy who really just I don't know about toe injuries. These toe injuries, like turf toe, I guess. How much is that going to affect him? It's hard to say. Seems like it'd be less likely that they'll give him reps on offense than they did earlier in the year, because they have this Munford guy now, another offensive lineman that they've added since I think I haven't even done a video since he's been on the team. Kind of random that we got this guy who I guess is sort of a journeyman, but has played for New England before, and I suppose we needed him against San Diego, because they were running 6 offensive lineman sets in that game. I just remember Tonga being the human bowling ball and letting Travion run for whatever it was, 70-yard run or something like that. So it makes you want to see if maybe Tonga can get back in there and get a block like that again. But I doubt they'll do it against this Texans defense, which is very strong. To put a guy in who's having foot trouble back in the game to try to block against guys that are just scary and beastly, you never know. I hope he's well enough to do it. That would be cool to see. But I bet I'm going to assume that they're going to be giving Munford more run in this game than Tonga on the offensive line anyway. Hopefully Tonga is a difference-making part of the defensive line to stop the run. I'm sort of halfway between wanting to talk about the Chargers game and talk about the Texans game. I don't want to do a whole review video for the Chargers, so I guess I'll go a little bit. I think I'm going to talk about the Chargers game in relation to the Texans game. The pressure was a problem in that game. I don't know if they went to the 6 offensive linemen later in the game. I think that might have been what it was. I never felt like, Ramondre and like Travion didn't do much in that game at all. He had a few runs here and there, but it was the same sort of deal. He ran to the line a lot. It seems like the only way to get Travion involved is to scheme gaps for him to run through, or to run him to the right side of the line. I remember in that Buffalo game, we were able to make a hole with Onwenu and Moses. So I'm going to think that that's probably going to be, if we're going to involve Travion, I'm going to say we should probably run to the right side of the line, not the left. I haven't been able to see like a decent hole on the left side of the line for quite some time now. Seems like every big run that gets broken off goes on the right side. So I don't have a lot of faith. Will Campbell played really badly. The pocket collapsed into Drake May on more plays than not in that game. He got better after they went into base defense, whatever that means. Again, I'm not the kind of guy who understands these things. I don't know what base means. I guess base is like what they usually play, and they were playing some other form. This is where I'm not an analyst. I'm sorry. As a fan, I don't go this in depth. But whatever base means, I think it sort of meant that it was an attempt to protect against the running quarterback and runs more. I'm not exactly sure, because whatever it opened up passing opportunities. Seemed like that's the whole thing. It's like, it doesn't seem like it was really. I don't understand, why did the Chargers move into base defense? They were having so much success in the first half. Why not just keep playing the same defense the whole game? It seems like now they say, oh, the Chargers went into base, so now we can throw on them. Well, why would the Chargers do that? Why would they want to give Drake May an opportunity to throw on him? It's just confusing to me. So I don't understand. Maybe it was just a bad adjustment by Minter. But if the Texans play, I think the Texans can look at that game and say, well, why don't we just not go into base? Is this a thing where like teams have to go into base at a certain point? This is where again, this is just coming, I'm pulling stuff out of my butt right now. But I don't understand why the Texans can't do what the Chargers did for the first half of that game and just totally shut down our offense. Because that's exactly what happened. Our offense was totally shut down. We worked our way down the field a couple times, got some field goals. It was never easy. Drake May, I thought, played reckless, especially in terms of when the pocket was collapsing. People have been saying this. He needs to grab the ball and fall. That's what he needs to do. He doesn't need to be like his arm movements. He's got the ball up in the air for everyone to knock out. It's like, I don't know if it's that he doesn't feel the pocket pressure, or if he's just overconfident, thinks he can make a throw from inside a collapsing pocket. Either run out of the pocket with the ball clutched tightly, or go down with the ball clutched tightly. But none of this stuff, This isn't doing anything. This is a prime situation. The ball's flying. You got your Drake May, supposedly smaller hands than usual, holding the ball up here, so any one of these guys that's rushing can knock it out. I appreciate that the guy wants to make a play happen, but that's not the way to do it. You're not going to throw yourself out of a quickly collapsing pocket. You got to get yourself some space. So if you can run with the ball, fine. But if not, take the sack. I'm wondering. Some people are wondering. Well, I mean, our defense, the scheming. I guess it's just it never looked that good earlier in the year. It looked. I mean, I'm not even going to say that. It did look that good, but only after. Usually about one quarter or a couple of drives, usually a drive and a half, and then all of a sudden the defense would turn on and we'd see that kind of thing. And they talk about the DVOA stats and say that the Pats defense was middle of the pack at best. But to me, this is where those DVOA stats, I like that. They're weighted, they're technical stats that people put some time into. They sound like they're smart, but this is kind of like, I relate this to sort of like the analytics crowd that say to go for it on 4th and 3, instead of kicking a field goal. What have we seen? A lot of times it doesn't work that way. I just, the same way with baseball. There's all these analytics in baseball say similar types of things. And I think sometimes the analytics are just wrong. Some people live and die by these things. They're math nerds. I think this is a key kind of like back and forth. In just as an aside here, I shouldn't even get into this, but in sports, there's two sides to an argument. There's what does the statistics say, and what do we think matters based on emotion, feeling, And I think this is the thing that the analytics people, I don't know. I guess they would think that they don't miss on this because stats are always better than emotions. The logic's always better than emotion when making decisions. But I do think when it comes to big games that you have to take emotions into account to some extent. And I think that's what the analytics people miss. I think emotions are running high. I think they matter more. I think in the regular season you could probably go with the analytics. Even then, that guy, was it Deuce Staley, I think it was, for the Chargers. He always went by the analytics. And you'd watch those games, you think, what the hell are you doing going for fourth down here when you could use some points? Over and over again. It just felt that way. Maybe he didn't have the right team to go for it on fourth down. Maybe that was the problem. All right, just as a quick, to finish this up, I sometimes I believe in the analytics, sometimes I believe in going for it on fourth down, but I think it's all situationally dependent, and I do believe that the psychology of a game matters. I really do. I don't think it's just about the statistics. I think sometimes you have to consider where people's heads are at, where their emotions are at. I wouldn't say that to a fault, you go there, but I just think to ignore one side or the other entirely is stupid. You have to rely on both. If you make every decision based on analytics, not such a good idea. Make, even more than half your decisions based on emotion. Not a good idea. I'd say maybe I'll weight it a little towards analytics because I tend to be more of a fan of logic than emotion, but not by a lot, not by as much as the analytics people want to believe. So anyway, getting back to their defensive DVOA, they're middle of the pack. This is one of those things where you watch the team like I have all year, and yeah, they look bad in that first drive, right? That's where I think they fall to middle of the pack. But then you watch the rest of the game, and they just lock down. They have this ability to just sort of turn it up, to a point. It wasn't every game like that, but some games like that. I mean, games where it wasn't like that. The Atlanta game, they sort of let Atlanta stay around, and they didn't really lock down in that game. At that point, I think somebody was already missing, right? Were they missing somebody in that game? They weren't missing Tonga. No, they had Williams in that game. They had an injured Landry. They had Spillane at that point. So, yeah. I would hope that the defense has improved since then. I think that was probably the least impressive game the defense had against Atlanta. And a lot of that was because they had such a great mismatch against, they kept mismatching Marcus Jones with Drake London. And, they were very clever at scheming so that Drake London could get on Marcus Jones and constantly use that height advantage to beat him. That was the game in which I thought that there was also then there was, I don't pay as much heed to the Ravens game. There was a lot of open receivers in the Ravens game, but I think, weren't they missing somebody? Somebody was playing, I know, Carlton Davis played well on that one. I think they were just missing the pass rush. At that point, Spillane was out. Landry was pretty compromised, I'd say. I don't know. That Ravens game wasn't pretty either, but I felt like that had more to do with Derrick Henry. There wasn't great pass coverage in that game either, to be honest. There was a lot of guys open in that Ravens game, especially with Tyler Huntley playing. So it does seem like our defense doesn't do well in zone generally. At least it didn't for most of the year. Maybe they're getting better. I mean, people were saying that in that Charger game he called them mostly zone defense, which is hard to believe given that the constant failure that we've seen that our team plays zone most of the year. It seemed like maybe the Woodson, Charles Woodson, what's his name? I don't remember his first name. But maybe Woodson got better at it. Maybe Hawkins got better at it. Maybe maybe Gonzalez and Jones and Davis got better at it. But our secondary has never looked as good as they did in that game. Just shut down, And the pressure also looked great in that game, especially Milton Williams. He got the Milton-Barmore combo pushing again. Still not seeing Barmore get through to the quarterback, but he is at least creating pressure and allowing Milton Williams to break through more, I think. And I love it when Marcus Jones blitzes. He seems like a really good blitzer. I've seen him get through a lot. I haven't seen a sack from Spillane. He's more of a run stopper, I think. And I would like to see another sack from Landry. I'm trying to remember who else got sacks in that game for us. I think we got, Anthony. I love my boy Anthony, man. That guy, thank God they didn't cut him, I gotta be sending Anthony more. He's having like a little renaissance here. So yeah, we're gonna have to bring pressure in the Texans game the same way we brought pressure. I don't know why, honestly, they didn't bring more pressure from the beginning of that Charger game. I don't know if it was because Herbert was decent against the blitz. I mean, maybe they were afraid Herbert was going to run more if we blitzed too much. But as soon as we turned on the pressure in the second half, I mean, the offensive line was probably more tired, so maybe that was the plan all along. But it seemed like we could have been pressuring them more in the first half because once they dialed up the pressure, they were getting through to him quite a bit. And it seemed like he was playing, running wild. So I hope that they pressure early and often here. Maybe they thought that they would save the pressure for when the game got to be in a more critical situation, which I could sort of understand. I just feel like you can't let the Texans score early in this game. I think that's important. The Texans score early in this game, and it starts to feel like a monumental task coming back from it because I think psychologically it'll be difficult if you start down, more than a touchdown to that team. Once you're down, even if you're down by 2 scores, you're starting to. I think some doubt starts to creep in. Can we win this game? And I think that from the beginning, they should try to be hitting them hard from the beginning and prevent them from taking that early lead. Because if it's just a touchdown, I think you can come back from that. But I'm seriously concerned about this game. In my mind, this game is there. I know the Pats are favored by 3, up to 3.5. You think about this game and you think, okay, we should be able to stop the Texans' offense to some extent, especially if I think Hollins being out is sort of the whole key to this whole thing. Honestly, if Hollins wasn't out, I think I would make the game a pick'em. Boy, this is really working out great, huh? It's super professional here. The way this blanket keeps falling, it really looks great, doesn't it? So yeah, if Stroud, I think Stroud is a good quarterback. I do. I'm kind of a Stroud believer. He looked bad against against the Steelers, and everyone's kind of giving him crap for that. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that it was cold. Maybe he was uncomfortable in that scenario. A lot of people are saying that him fumbling is not a common occurrence, so you have to assume law of averages. Unless he's on some kind of a fumbling streak, he's probably not going to fumble too much. I thought that the passes he made in that Pittsburgh game were pretty impressive. He had guys open down the field, and he hit them, about as well as you could hit him on deep balls. I don't think the Steelers have the pass defense that we have. But, if we're playing in zone, it's possible we could see them revert back to the same kind of defensive zone mistakes they were making earlier in the season. So, that game against the Chargers, I think, because their offensive line was so decimated and compromised, we were able to get into Herbert's head a little bit, and so he may have missed some opportunities. Some people were saying McConkey was open on certain routes that he wasn't seeing. Will we be able to pressure Stroud the same way? A lot of this game is going to come down to that, because I did notice, I went back and looked at some games, and Stroud definitely, it's in the statistics, but Stroud doesn't do well under pressure. Some people were saying maybe we'll have to, show pressure, but not blitz, because apparently he's better against the blitz than he is against general pressure, which is kind of weird to me, because you would think, every time I saw any kind of pressure getting through to him, I don't know if the Pats can get pressure with our front four. Maybe the Milton-Barmore combo, yeah. Tonga's not really a rusher. That guy Durden, I think, is more of a run blocker, although I could see him breaking through a little bit. I don't think we're going to get, Landry is compromised. Jason has moments, and he was good in that game in San Diego. Some key pass rushes there. I think Chason will have to be the strongest element of the pass rush in this game, which is too bad because Landry is, by the numbers, a better pass rusher when he is healthy. I don't know how healthy Landry is that he can help, but they're going to have to dial up. I think they're going to have to dial up blitzes. I don't know how, about these stats. I didn't look it up. I don't know if I have access to those advanced stats. All I know is that C.J. Stroud doesn't look great. when he's being pressured in the games I saw. And if we're going to get pressure on him, I feel like we have to, especially if they're going to use. Apparently, they use sometimes 6 offensive lineman sets, and I think we've got to blitz. I think they have to blitz, and they have to blitz early. And I think we have to blitz and rely on our guys in man coverage. That to me is the better game plan here. If they're not doing anything too exotic on offense, then, especially without Nico Collins, we should be able to rely on Gonzalez and Davis and Jones to cover their guys. I don't know about the safeties. The safeties, I think that's going to be the tricky part. I think they have a tight end that's one of Stroud's favorite receivers. That's going to be, I think, the big challenge in this game is covering again the middle of the field. I think it's going to come down to that bit again. If we can get pressure on Stroud, maybe he has a harder time getting the ball out to the middle of the field. But if you don't bring blitzes a lot, and that for that reason, I expect this game to be quite entertaining to watch. I love watching pressure be put on the quarterback, and it's pretty exciting. So at least on defense, we'll all be able to kind of grind our teeth and hopefully watch the defense get some anger out for us. And if we don't get to Stroud, I think we're gonna have problems. And unfortunately, our pass rush has had issues getting to the quarterback. They say this offensive line for the Texans is capable, but not outstanding. It sounds like they're about as good as our offensive line, honestly. I think the rankings are pretty similar. Our offensive line at times is good. I think they've said this offensive line is improving for the Texans, which is definitely concerning because we don't want to be catching them on their upswing. They do have a rookie on the right side. I can't quite remember. They should probably be putting Chase on against Ursary more often than not. I don't know what side he usually rushes from, but it's hard. Maybe Landry gets a sack if he's up against Ursary. I'm not sure. But this is not going to be the cakewalk getting pressure on the quarterback that it was against the Chargers. I think they're going to struggle a little bit more, which is the only thing that makes Stroud dangerous. We'll have to see how good if Coors has another game plan drawn up where he can disguise coverages and confuse Stroud. They didn't say anything about Stroud being easily confused. I think they said, I don't remember. I can't remember if they said that Stroud played better versus zone. I think they said, I'm not sure. I know we played a lot of zone last week and it looked good, so they can do more of what they did last week. We'll be fine. And pretty much the defense should be run almost exactly the same as it was last week, except for the fact that they should be working on keeping on. I mean, really, you can't complain about what they did last week. Now, to imagine that they're going to be able to hold them to 3 points for the game, probably unlikely. Honestly, it's not impossible to see that as a possibility because at least in the Belichick era, we would see our defenses hold teams to minimal points for multiple games in a row. So it seems like sometimes if you have your game plan working and everybody is executing and everybody is running on all cylinders and your health is good enough, that a good game plan can work. It just comes as a surprise to me that this guy Zach Core, a rookie defensive play caller, was able to stymie the Chargers. But I have a concern that had more to do with Greg Roman's lack of creativity as a play caller than it did Zach Core's amazing defensive calls. Some people are saying that they are overrating that Zach Core's defense wasn't as complicated as it made out to be. Apparently, Greg Cosell said that. And that's what worries me the most. I feel like no matter who the coordinator is for the Texans, they're going to be better than Greg Roman, who's notoriously bad. I don't know why he was even on that team. And I think Zach Core is going to be challenged in ways that he wasn't last week. So I don't expect us to hold the Texans to 3 points, but you never know. It's hard to say how much of that performance last week was a really good game plan versus, going against a team with no offensive line and a bad offensive coordinator. I'm tempted to say that was the bigger reason why they were great. I think they were also played really well on top of that, but I think even playing really well, I'll be surprised if we can hold the Texans under 10 points. So I'll say that. Um, yeah, I think the run game for Houston, I have a lot of faith in the Pats not to let them run. And I think that's going to help a lot. As well as Marks and Chubb played against the Steelers. People were saying the Steelers had a pretty good run defense. I think the Pats' run defense is one of the best in the league when everybody's healthy. And Landry is the most compromised of our injured players, and maybe Tonga's a little compromised. I don't know. It sounds like he's okay. I mean, he was out for a long while. Didn't play last week, so maybe he's not quite. But I mean, we were great against the run last week without Tonga. Now we've got Tonga. And I just think back to those early games up until Milton Williams went out, and 50 yards was a lot of rushing yards. I think they said 53 yards is the most yards they've given up to a running back. If we hold them to a combination 50 yards like we were in the early days, and I have see no reason to expect that we won't, then they're going to be forced to pass, and then we can dial up the pressure more on Stroud. So yeah, I feel pretty good about the Patriots' defense against this offense. I think the passing game will present more problems in this game than it did against the Chargers, but I think they'll be able to generally limit as long as they're able to get pressure on Stroud and stop the run game, which I fully expect that they will. I think there's a good chance that we will hold the Texans, to under 2 touchdowns. I'm going to say, or at least under 3 touchdowns. We'll say, I'll give you my final score prediction, but it's not a lot more than 2 touchdowns. We'll say that. We need a great game from our secondary, and also I think a key factor here, we can't really afford injuries, and this is going to be dangerous. I think Gonzalez is definitely going to play. It sounds like his concussion thing was pretty minor. I think he said he wanted to go even in the game where they took him out, and there was some league being especially safe with good reason. We don't want people to play through concussions. It's potentially going to give them CTE and have them ruin their brains for the future. But all signs are pointing out. I had a feeling Gonzalez would be back based on things I've been hearing, and it looks as if he's going to be a go unless he has some headaches tomorrow or the day after. That's extremely good news. If we didn't have Gonzalez, I'd feel a lot worse about this game. The fact that they probably won't have Nico Collins, although that could change in a day or two, and the fact that we probably will have Christian Gonzalez is huge. It's huge for this game. I think that is probably the biggest reason why. I think I would have actually been really afraid that the Pats would lose this game without that situation. If the Pats lose now with Collins supposedly out, likely out because this is the second concussion of the year, and with Gonzalez likely going, then we'll be a little embarrassed after this game, I'm going to say, because they're missing their best receiver, and we're pretty much fully healthy. On some level, I think we're going to have to. I mean, I think the Patriots have already proven that they belong in the playoffs. People, the weak strength of schedule stuff is obviously. I think at this point it's pretty clear it's overblown. We're almost as good, if not better, than all the teams that are left at this point, except for maybe Seattle and the Rams are the ones that scare me the most, and they could be better than us. But I think that they can beat any team right now before this Texans game. But this Texans game is going to really be the proof of the pudding, They're going to come in, and we'll see what they look like. I mean, if they look good against this Texans team, then we're Super Bowl bound. I'm telling you, we're beating Buffalo or the Broncos. I think if they get through this Texas team, they can get through whoever's in the AFC Championship. I'm not afraid of Josh Allen and his messed up foot and his lack of premier receivers, although we got Brandon Cooks, who's been playing pretty well. And their lack of run defense, which favors us a lot with our 2 running back attack at this point. That's much more well developed than it was earlier in the season. They might have Ed Oliver back. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that because that's far. But basically, I feel pretty damn good about this team if they win. Period. I don't care. I don't think they need to win 30 points. Some people said they scored 30 points and then cancel the Super Bowl and send the Lombardi to New England, which I pretty much agree with that. I don't think they're scoring 30 points in this game though. But I'll get to my score soon. So, I think the real key is just going to be the real key is like I expect the Patriots to win this game. I think the real key is going to be shutting down the Texans passing game. That's going to be the whole thing, and especially the tight ends. That one tight end that they have. That's going to be the tricky part. I think that's where we get beat, or not so even the tight end, but just getting beat in the middle of the field. That's been our Achilles heel all year. Not getting if we don't get if we don't get pressure on the quarterback, and we play poorly in zone coverage and leave spaces open in the middle of the field, there's a good chance the Texans will be able to beat us, basically because their defense is so good. Now, I haven't really looked at the other side. I'm finally going to get around to that. On the other side, you've got the scary part, the fact that the Texans do have probably the best defense in the NFL. It's definitely scarier than Seattle's defense because Seattle doesn't rush. I know they play Seattle. They say Seattle plays disciplined defense, whatever. I feel like May is good enough that he can beat as long as he beat any defense, as long as he has time to think and process. What's scary about this team is those two elite pass rushers on both sides of the line. May May does really well against the blitz, so it's like we shouldn't be worried about it. You should be better against this team, I guess, than Seattle. Some people would say, but I don't know. I think while he does well against the blitz, there's no weakness in this defense. There's just no weakness in this defense. They're telling me that all along the line, the scariest thing about this defense, honestly, is that they're great at stopping the run. That's going to make it really hard for us. Because if you remember in that game against the Chargers, it was mostly Ramondre, and, the best plays for Ramondre were passing plays. They were not rushing plays. He had a few rushes of 4 or 5 yards that were okay, peppered in, fine. They didn't really. It wasn't something we could rely on in that game. They didn't score until the touchdown. They started making those long pass plays to Booty and they had one to Chisholm. They had one to. There was a couple to Booty, I think. I think he had. Then of course there was the big Hunter Henry touchdown. I mean, there really wasn't that many. They didn't make that many offensive plays in that game. And there was a couple to Henry, I think. Where was I? I've lost my train of thought here. But the running game. That's right. The running game was not really a factor against San Diego, and I really don't expect it to be much of a factor against the Texans. Hopefully we'll see. Like I said, I think if they're going to get any holes, they'll be running it to the right. I don't expect Will Campbell. I think I'll say real quick here. I think there's a mistake being made here in not playing Ben Brown. They're playing a guy, Jared Wilson, who I'm glad he's gotten time all year on the left side of the line, and maybe he need some playoff experience. He's gotten some playoff experience against the Chargers. I know they don't want to put together a new lineup. They're afraid about people working together. Look, when we beat Buffalo, Jared Wilson was not in the offensive line. Jared Wilson was injured, and we had Ben Brown in there, and that was the best the team has played all year in that Buffalo game. They looked great in that game. The offensive line looked great in that game. It was a good game for the offensive line. And that was against a team that didn't really have a pass rush. But I think they're making a mistake playing Jared Wilson. I think this was a bad. I'm going to call Vrabel's coaching into question on just this one thing. Generally, I think Vrabel's a fantastic coach. I remember him out-dueling Belichick in that last playoff game for Brady against the Titans and thinking, wow, this guy really had a game plan. He actually out-coached Belichick. So I know Vrabel's a genius. I mean, he makes great decisions for the most part. I can't really critique a lot. But I will say that I think if the Patriots lose, part of it will be because they started Jared Wilson and not Ben Brown. I'm not the only one thinking this. The guys on the Patriots show said the same thing. Ben Brown is a bigger body. I don't think they're going to necessarily be able to run that well to the left side, but when they gave this guy a contract extension for a reason. And the problem is just that this guy, Jared Wilson, he's a rookie and he's undersized for his position. That doesn't make sense to play a guy like that against the league's best pass rusher, or against even an interior line that gets penetration. You don't want that guy in there. And so that's the biggest concern for me in this whole game. I think Campbell has a bounce back game. He didn't play that well. We'll see. This will be a real big test for Will Campbell because the knock on him in the beginning of the year was short arms. He won't be able to handle certain guys who have certain tendencies that allow them to. This thing is such a bad idea. Allow them to get by guys with short arms, and apparently the guy that Will Anderson plays a game that is going to be hard for Will Campbell to block. I do think Will Campbell has a better game in the second game than he did in the first game, but a lot of it depends on where his injury is at. I think he did come back a little bit early. Some people were suggesting he should even be playing in the playoffs. I don't think that. I think we should. I think he's the best left tackle we have. I like Vidarian Lowe's backup work, but I don't think he's better than Will Campbell. Will Campbell had the best ratings for pass protection of any of the rookie left tackles. Significantly better than Ursery on the other side of the ball. And I think they're going to need Will Campbell to play at least a better game than he did against San Diego in order for them to have a chance. And I think he will. I'm not sure. My guess is that the offensive line coach will have seen the mistakes he was making last week, sorry, and get him to focus on being more aggressive as a left tackle. They're saying he was waiting too much on guys. He's got to push more. I think he has that in him. So I expect a better game from Will Campbell than last week. I don't know how much better, honestly, because he's going up against a better pass rusher on the Texans than he was on the Chargers, which is definitely scary. And I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith. I just feel like he had such a bad game in San Diego, and he's been pretty decent all year. I wouldn't be surprised if he bounced back. Let's just say that. I don't know. I expect him to do better. But I wouldn't be surprised if he at least holds his own to some extent for a rookie against one of the league's pass rushers. But the idea of starting two rookies on the left side when you don't have to is I think we're taking a risk we don't need to be taking here. So that scares me. I think Moses and Onwenu will probably, also have moments where they struggle against the other side. Whoever, I don't remember which side they put these guys on, but it doesn't really matter. To me, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, sometimes it sounds like people giving Will Anderson more credit for being a better rusher, even though this Danielle Hunter guy has, or Danielle, I don't know how you say it. It sounds like a girl's name. I don't know why, but he'd probably kill me. I'm sure he'd rip me limb from limb if he heard me say that. If he wanted to, he could tear my heart out like the dude in freaking Temple of Doom and be like Kalima Shakti De, and I'd be like, oh my God, why did I open my mouth? But I do think that that at the very least, Onwenu and Moses are going to be able to at least put up more of a fight on the right side of the line, let's say, than Campbell and Wilson will. What worries me is I like the idea of May rolling out to the right against this guy, but I feel like, whenever you have a guy rolling out to the right against, if you got a top pass rusher, then I think it's Danielle Hunter. I have no idea how you say this guy's name. It sounds like Danielle to me. Anyway, if he gets out there and Hunter can blow past, is it Hunter? That's it. I'm sorry. This is just all over the place. This is not my greatest work here. What is the guy's name? Well, 1 second here. I gotta look at this too. Alright, there we go. I'm gonna get his name right, just so that the guy doesn't come and kill me. Let's see. I mean, it looks like Danielle, I think. Let's see. Defense. Will Anderson. It is. It looks like Danielle Hunter. I mean, I think they're Danili. Is that what they're saying his name is? Anyway, he's got 3 more sacks than Will Anderson does. But I'm right. It is Hunter. Okay, that's good. I haven't been using the wrong name. Danili, I guess I'll say, even though that's, if you want to spell your name Danili, you should spell it some other way, because it looks like Danielle. But anyway. So yeah, I'm not sure who plays which side, but it's hard to have. I like the idea of Drake May rolling out, but I can also see in my mind the ends just getting beat and him getting sacked in the backfield, to the right, back over here as he's going to the right. He goes back and then he gets sacked, and then the ball comes out, and that's the other scary thing about this Texans team is those defensive scores. We've been susceptible to that stuff, and I don't. I think about that Atlanta game right before the half. I don't want to see anything like that. And hopefully Drake May learns to take care of the ball a little better than he has this year. even with his small hands. And I also think we should be on Ramondre alert. I love Ramondre. He's bounced back. He's looked great the last few weeks. I think he is a sort of an absolute must to be a weapon in this game, or it hurts the offense a lot. But I do worry that we're going to see the return of Butterfingers Ramondre here. I certainly hope not, but I worry about that. I wouldn't want to see that. The fans would crap all over him, and he wouldn't really deserve it. I imagine if he fumbled at all, it'd be one time in this game. Hopefully, no more than that. If he did, I think we should all forgive him if he does. It's not the end of the world. I just feel like it's been a long stretch. Maybe he's got it top of his mind now, and he's not going to lose the ball. But I don't know. If anyone's going to make him fumble, it'll be this team. And I'm also just worried about the entire health of the team, honestly, altogether. You've got guys. You got this Shair guy, Al Shair, who's just a killer. They say he plays dirty like Rodney Harrison. We all know what Rodney Harrison used to do to guys back in the day. And all these guys hit hard. What scares me a lot about this game is even if we win, we may come out of this with such intense injuries that it'll make games against the remaining two games difficult. And that's why I really didn't want to play this Texans defense for this reason. I didn't want to see guys get bashed up by a defense that hits as hard as some people are saying they hit like the Legion of Boom hits. I don't know if you ever saw if you watched that game, Legion of Boom versus Denver that one year. It looked painful for all the Denver players involved. So highly concerned about this team. They really don't have a weakness on defense other than the fact that supposedly they play a predictable style, and they're so good at it, they don't need to change it. You wonder if they'll mix it up a little bit just to, change up the reputation, just to throw them a few curveballs in there. And, they say that the one thing you can do is you can beat them deep, which sounds like it would be something that would be great. I could see us getting a deep ball to Kyle Williams or Booty. Obviously, those are the two big deep threats. I don't think Diggs is a deep threat anymore, but Kyle Williams and Booty certainly have the ability to beat the team deep. So I think you have to get both of those guys involved, and hopefully one of the two or both do end up with a deep touchdown. But even that worries me because if you're throwing deep to Williams or Booty, you better run a play that gets the ball out quick. Because I don't know how much time they're going to have to get downfield. It's hard to imagine them having much time to get downfield when you've got Anderson and Hunter bearing down on you from the first moment, especially with the left side of the line being compromised. There's a lot of things that make me worried about the ability of the Patriots offense to function whatsoever with this amount of pass rush coming at them. And even scarier that they don't even have to blitz. They get that pressure without blitzing, and so you've got a situation where Drake May is going to be under duress, and he won't have a lot of guys open. We've seen how that's gone before. So I don't know. I wasn't feeling good about the Charger games for the same reason. Great coverage downfield for the Chargers, and great pass rush. That all proved to be the case. This is a similar situation, except you dial up the difficulty level again. And obviously, we didn't score well in that Charger game. One touchdown, And people are assuming Drake May is going to play better, I mean, he only hadn't had any playoff experience. So people were saying that he had jitters in that first game. That was probably part of it. But I feel like bigger part of it was, was a scheming thing. They couldn't get him into base. Once they got him into base, it was better. I think McDaniels didn't know how to respond to Minter's defense, which is a little scary because this guy also has, whereas, Minter's game plan might have been a little more complex, I think this guy's game plan is going to be at least more simple. And so people are saying, well, Josh McDaniels can scheme around simple, and I hope to God that's the case. But with that constant pass rush coming in with very little faith for me in the left side of the line, especially if they, given that they're starting Jarrett Wilson, which I think is a mistake. It's hard to imagine we're going to have any time to throw, and they're going to be forcing us into throws a lot because I don't think our running backs are going to be that great. So where do I see hope? Well, I do think there's a possibility that we can get coverage long enough. We throw in those extra offensive linemen. We throw in guys who can chip. We've already seen Travion Henderson's gotten better at pass blocking. We know Ramondre can block. I wasn't impressed with Hunter Henry's blocking earlier. Maybe we get Austin Hooper in there to block. We get Thayer Munford in there to block. Ideally, we have a few plays where we just have extra blockers in, and we shoot. Since there'll be one-on-one coverage, we shoot Booty and Williams down the field. Maybe crossers or something. I don't know, but that'll be our opportunity. We're going to need big plays to win this game. That's what I've gathered from watching. I don't think people are saying it's not going to be easy to put together a meticulous drive down the field. It's a scary thing because, big plays are not common. I mean, they're more common for us than they are for most teams, so I suppose that works to our favor. But you're not going to get a guy, they know they can get beat deep, and they're going to be on the lookout for those plays developing. And, if we can't get the running game going, which it doesn't sound like it'll be easy to get that going at all, then they're going to be prepared for those long plays because they know that that's our specialty. So, and they have very good cornerbacks. So I am concerned about this game, even without Collins being in. The thing that gives me the most faith is our defense versus their offense. I think it's possible for us to do a good job there, especially after last week. Mostly, I feel good about us stopping the run and then forcing them into passing and then getting pressure on Stroud. I think that's going to happen. But we're going to see a game very similar to San Diego. There's some people saying take the over. I'm like, you got to be effing kidding me. Ain't no way this is going to be the over. I know it's 40 points. I think is the over under. I'm telling you, this is my pick of the week. Go the under. I do not see either team scoring a lot of points. It's going to be a defensive battle. I hate to say it, but I think the Texans are more likely to score over 20 points than we are. That's not to say I think the Texans are going to win. But, I could see our defense breaking down more easily than the Texans' defense breaking down. I feel like this is just a defense that is not going to break down very much. I don't think we're going to get that many deep shots at the end zone. I think it will be crucial that May converts at least one or two deep shots, and hopefully two. You're just not used to seeing two deep shots in a game. Maybe from May, I guess, but we're going to need those two deep shots, and then we're going to need field goals after that, because that's probably going to be the best we can hope for. And it sounds like making sustained drives against these guys is not easy, because they don't give up a lot in the middle of the field. It sounds like deep shots is all they give you, and that's just, it's all very scary. The way this defense is described, I've always been a believer. There are two things that can get you to a Super Bowl. One is a great quarterback, and the other is a great defense. We do have a great quarterback, so that's a huge positive. But he's a great quarterback who's in his second year. So I feel like a lot of us are getting ahead of ourselves on Drake. Obviously he was MVP, or at least played at an MVP level this year. Whether or not it'll be MVP doesn't really matter. He's a great quarterback when he's on. And if Drake May is on in this game, I don't doubt that he won't find ways to pick the Texans defense apart to some extent. I don't want to say pick apart is even a strong word. I don't doubt that he'll be able to play well enough to score. The other thing is that they don't do well on scrambles. We're going to see a lot of Drake May running when everybody's covered. I think that's definitely going to be a thing. There's some people are saying they're going to put a spy on Drake May. I don't know how much can you really do all this. Can you put a spy? And, it's like there's a reason why they don't cover well on scrambles. So we're going to see some plays break down. We're going to see Drake May get some first downs with his legs, which is going to be huge. I think we're going to see some screen passes also to especially Ramondre. Like that worked well against San Diego. I don't see why it can't work well against. I don't think Ramondre will be able to run for as long of a stretch as he did against the Chargers in that play that got him away from their own end zone. I think stuff like that. He might make it 15 yards instead of 30, 40 yards. So we'll see. I love Ramondre. He's good in the open field, but we're talking about a team that doesn't miss tackles. That's people say that scares me too. The more I hear about this Texans defense, the scarier it gets. It just seems like there's very little weak spots, other than the deep ball throws that I fully expect to be there. What worries me the most is that I think we're going to struggle to run the ball. We've all year our offensive line has showed it's incapable of making holes, and if they can. If we can do it like we did in that last game against the Chargers, where we can get 4 to 5 yards on a rush from Ramondre, that'll be at least good enough to keep them guessing a little bit. But, it's just hard to imagine they're going to stick with that very long if we're just getting nowhere. If we're just constantly running into a pile, we're going to be forced to throw, and then they're going to be coming at May hardcore. And then we're going to be relying on scrambles and screen passes, And scramble, screen passes, and the occasional deep shot if they can just give them just enough protection to get the ball down the field. It doesn't sound like a winning game plan to me. I think we'll see. I feel like the screen passes, you're not going to, again, it'll work. You can get the defense, but the secondary tackles so well that even if, you're able to draw the pass rush and then get over their heads, which is also risky because they'll be probably trying to tip the ball. If you can get the ball to Ramondre or Travion, they probably don't go as far on those screen passes, and that's what worries me. I don't know. I don't want to talk myself out of thinking the Patriots are going to win this game, but I think this game is going to be a hell of a lot harder. I think our offense is going to struggle against this Texans team, and I'm worried. I am worried about this game. This is the game I did not want to see. If you remember my previous videos, I talked about playoff scenarios. I did not want Buffalo to lose to Philadelphia so that we could clinch the AFC East because I had full confidence in the team to beat the Jets and Miami. Of course, that proved to be the case. They were able to do both, even though they didn't look great in the Miami game. We would have been better off not facing the Texans here. This is the team I was the most afraid of, and for good reason. I believe that this team will go to the Super Bowl if we don't. I'll put it that way. I think this team is better than the Bills. I think this team is better than the Broncos. This team's already beaten the Bills, so you've seen that one time. I expect that to be the case again. I think the Bills would have to travel to Texas, right? Pretty sure that's the case. And if the Texans have to go to Denver to beat the Broncos, I think that's going to happen too. I could very well see it. I think the Super Bowl representative will either be New England or Texas or Houston. The Texans. So, I think this is it. I think this is the AFC Super Bowl, if you want to call it that. We might face Boston or Buffalo in the next round, and we might be have more injuries against Buffalo, which will make that game maybe just as scary in some ways. But full strength. I think the team needs to be as close to full strength as possible to beat this Texans team. That's why I sort of see this as more the AFC Super Bowl. We're going to be close to full strength for this team. They're not going to be quite full strength, but they're still going to be tough to beat. We're talking about a defense here that's, potentially right up there with Legion of Boom. I don't know about they're not exactly, the 2000, whatever it was, 2001 Ravens. I forget what year, one of those years. They're not quite that good, but they're good. They're like Super Bowl winning good. A lot of people talk crap about Stroud. They don't realize that with a great defense, you don't need a great offense. You just need to be mediocre. And we know C.J. Stroud can be mediocre. Can he be mediocre without Nico Collins? That's the question. That's why the Nico Collins thing's so important. So important. I think there's a thing that happens where people lose their best player and everyone just assumes the team is going to, be bad. And I think teams generally do step it up when their top player is out. I don't think they play as well as when their top player is in, but I think they don't drop off as much as people expect because I think everyone else knows they have to turn it up, and they do. So I think there is a drop off when teams are playing games without their best players, but I don't think it's ever as big of a drop off as we think it's going to be. And for that reason, I'm not going to count them out. I do think that our pass coverage should be able to be fairly effective. Not having to deal with Collins is pretty huge to help us get the pass coverage going. I just worry about the offensive game plan. This is going to be another what they call it, a rock fight against the Chargers. It's going to be another rock fight. I think our offensive line is going to struggle. Hopefully, I'm hoping Will Campbell has a good game. I'm hoping that Drake May has a better game than he did in Game 1. He rarely has two bad games in a row. I'm worried about the weather. It's going to be potentially a mix of snow and rain. I feel like in some ways that actually helps us, or helps the Texans more than us. I know people are saying the Texans play in a dome. They're not used to this weather. I feel like, in general, when the weather is crappy, defenses benefit more than offenses, If our biggest advantage over the Texans is that we have a great quarterback, then the fact that I'm hoping it errs more towards the side of snow than rain, because snow doesn't make things as slippery. If this is either a wet snow or it's rain, the ball will be slippery, and we've seen Drake May struggle in ball is slippery type conditions. I don't think he plays great in the rain. And if he has one of those series like he did against um, Tampa Bay, uh, and then what was it? I think there was another game where he played badly. I think was it against the Bengals. The Bengals was actually a clear day game, so that was kind of a head scratcher. We can't afford to have May have one of those days. He didn't play that bad against the Chargers ever. He didn't play as bad as he did. We can't have May take that weird mental vacation that he had. Where he just sort of goes somewhere else and becomes one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. It's like that's kind of what it looked like against for a while against the Bengals and against Tampa. It just seemed like he couldn't make any throws at all, and so it worries me a little bit with the weather. That the weather is going to compromise our number one advantage is ability. May is the top advantage we have. And so the weather actually worries me more than it makes me feel good. I know, usually teams that play in a dome struggle in that kind of weather. We're more accustomed to it, so that's fine. I just don't think the weather is going to help a lot necessarily. And but yeah, we'll see. So that's that. Let's see. We've got the early game. Texans are on short rest. We don't know 100% Collins isn't going to play. Probably won't because of the concussion. It's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to drive out to close to Boston, town surrounding Boston, to see this game with my cousin. Tomorrow night we're getting ourselves a pizza from Joni's, the best pizza in Massachusetts. Thanks to Dave Portnoy. I don't like Dave Portnoy's politics, but as far as pizza, the dude's right on, for the most part anyway. And he found Joni's Pizza for me, and it's the greatest. It's like New York pizza in Massachusetts. It's hard to find. So we're gonna get ourselves some pizza. Watch the games on Saturday. Might go out for one of these games on Saturday or Sunday. I'm not sure. We'll have to see if we have any plans. My cousin wants to do it up big on Saturday. He's got a new job. He's getting paid a bunch. I feel guilty taking advantage of his generosity, but at the same time, it'd be nice to go out and have a nice dinner with him. So. But, it's going to be a great game. I hope. I hope it's going to be a great game. If the Pats win, honestly, if the Pats don't win, I probably won't think it's going to be a great game. I think we have a good shot of winning. My final score prediction, I'm going to go with, I've thought this over a lot, and I'm not even 100% sure. I think I'm going to say, this is tough. I wanted to say 21-18 originally, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? That would be, let's see, that'd be 7-5. That doesn't work that well. I think I'm going to go, my final prediction is going to be, honestly, I just want to say, what was I going to say? I was going to say 2 field goals, 6, 7-13, 3 field goals. 7-14. I'll be bold and say we get to 20. I'll go 20-17. That's what I'll put it at the end. 20-17 Pats. It's gonna be tough. I'll say we score 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals. They score one of those touchdowns being the bomb touchdown. Another. It's hard to imagine the field goals because it's so hard to even get into their territory. I feel like this is going to be more like 17-14 or something like that. And I'm changing it. 17-14. That's my final prediction. I'm going to go 17-14. See, this way, if it goes to 2017, I can say that I was right the first time. At least I was right in some way. Anyway, 17-14 is my final prediction. I say the Pats pull this one out. I hope to God. I honestly don't feel very optimistic about this game. I feel like the odds should be a pick 'em. Although, if anything, maybe we should be giving a couple points to. I'd say if it came down to the spread, it's going to be about I don't know. I see us winning by 3 if we win at all. I could easily see Houston covering this game and having us win by a point also. But I think it's not going to be more than 3 points. So as far as the pick is concerned. If it's 3 points, I'll take the Pats. I don't know. I don't feel good about this one, folks. I really don't. This is the team I did not want to see. I think Texas has a championship quality defense. They have a good coach, and I actually like their team at the very least. Even though I don't like Texas in general, and I don't like people from the South and Houston, um, I do expect. I am impressed with the team. Seems like the coach seems smart. The players seem like stand up guys. If we get beat by these guys, it won't be like getting beat by you know Tyreek Hill or anything. These guys seem like stand up dudes. So I hope we win. If we do win, I feel a little bad for C.J. Stroud. It's not going to bode well for him failing again to get past this round. Um, there's a lot of different opinions on this game. I feel like a lot of people I've heard so many. This is so half and half. People are pretty evenly split on this game. So I think that just goes to show you, even despite the spread, I almost feel like this should be a pick 'em even with Collins out, and I'd almost be willing to favor the Texans if Collins was in. It's only Collins being out that gives me any kind of confidence that we can win this game. But I'm not going to pick against the Pats. What kind of an idiot would I be? I can't. With my heart, I'm gonna pick for the Pats to win. So it's mostly a heart pick. I'd say with the brain, I could see a chance. It's really very 50-50 in my mind with the brain. Collins out maybe is the one thing that gives the Pats an edge, but I really don't see it as a big edge. I really don't. It's gonna be a tough game. So there you have it. That's the whole thing. Let's see. Is there anything else I can say about this? I'll probably do a post game show. I'm sorry I missed so many other games. I'll do a quick video previewing the other games too. But yeah, this is do or die right now. This could be the end of the year, but I'm really looking forward to the game. I'm going to be nervous when getting up. I've watched so many pregame, uh, analyses and the predictions and a lot of good points out there, and in the end, I think it's coming down to mostly a coin toss. The refs could decide this game, and that's the last thing I want to see. I've heard, by the way, one last thing I'll say about this: there's conflicting reports. One person said that a ref is going in this game where the home team always wins, and another person said I heard one stat on that front on the Pat's pulpit page, and then another person said that the home team usually loses. So I've heard the exact opposite thing. I don't know what to believe. I certainly hope that the home team wins more often. If we lose this game on bad calls, it's going to be a bitter blow. And I do think that, it's going to hurt if we lose this game because, we all know at this point, I think we all know that this team, on the right day can beat anybody. And I hope we start we just get this new dynasty started this year, Let's just do it. Let's win the Super Bowl this year. Let's make them all hate us again. It's like the good old days, I'm trying to be rah-rah here, I don't have a lot of confidence that we're going to necessarily be a Super Bowl winning team. I think the NFC team is going to be very formidable, but I don't think it's impossible. Every team has their weaknesses. We have probably the most complete team. If we can get through this Texans defense, we can beat anybody. Let's go out there. Let's get the Super Bowl win. Let's start off a new dynasty. Let's make the league hate us again. They're not going to hate us as much as they did during Belichick, because at least we have likable guys now. That's good. But they're going to hate us fans, and we're going to love it. We're going to eat it right up. Yum, 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 yum. All the hate. Yum, yum, yum. Nothing like, that's like sustenance for a Pats fan. So, yeah. Go to hell, haters. Maybe you'll have the last laugh if we lose this one, but I'm gonna find it hilarious if this Pats Dynasty 2.0 starts after this year. We shall see. Yeah. All right. I guess that's it. Stay tuned for my post-game show after. If we win, I'll be super excited, and maybe I'll do a review of that game. And also do a general playoffs review. If we lose, I'll talk about what went wrong and talk about the changes we need to make and have a look forward to next season. So, thanks for tuning in. If you hope you enjoyed this. It's all over the place. I'm still learning. I realize I got to keep doing these videos. Got to be consistent. But yeah, go Pats. Let's get this done.